right? Keir Starmer is following basically Tory policies with some red paint on it, right? And calling it
Doesn't
Labour policies. And
doesn't matter doesn't matter whether you're a liberal. I'm saying sorry. Doesn't matter whether you're a radical or a moderate or a centrist. I believe EU altogether has really some fucked up policies because they are very good at distracting the populace of the actual issues that need to be addressed. For example,
I don't know. I find getting police to knock on people's door because you posted something on social media is rather radical, right? So I don't know.
But
That's true.
that's
That's true.
but why that's all symptomatic of the bigger problem, which is the UK doesn't know what to do, which goes back to my
Yes.
previous point.
it's
Right?
directionless.
It's not that they brought Keir Starmer in to blow everything up, to bring Farage in. Keir Starmer is just one puppet in a series of puppets. You got to keep in
Yes.
mind, like they've been fed this just shovel of democracy horseshit down their throats for hundreds of years now. So the people there, for the most part, believe that they still live in a democracy and not one of these uniparty, you can have whatever you want as long as the party's black, things, right? Which is what the UK is. So going back to my previous statement, all of these successive short-term UK governments, that's the people cycling through, and that's the people figuring out, oh my God, they're all crap. So the UK, that's why you're seeing them take to the streets now. It has little to do really with immigration. It has everything to do with the fact that they don't have jobs. It has everything to do with the fact that the jobs that they have don't pay enough. It has everything to do with the fact that their healthcare is getting progressively shittier. These are the things that people care about that the government's not talking about, to your point, because they're too busy coming up with all this other nonsense to distract people from the fact that they can't actually achieve anything anymore.
Yes.
Right?
The actual addressal of issues is not happening.
Yeah.
Well,
before-
I think, like you say that it's not about immigration, it's about jobs. But I think fundamentally the reason for immigration is because they want the lower, like they want, those free work, those cheap workers, So I think really it is
Sure.
related.
No, I'm not saying it's not, but what I'm saying, the people in England and the people in Manchester or whatever, they didn't wake up one day and say, gee, today I think I'll go racist today. And I think I'll go out and march on the streets against all these brown people who are now in my community. People don't think that way. What gets them to think that way is the fact that, oh crap, I've been unemployed from the factory now for 2.5 years, and I haven't been able to find another job, and I'm doing, DoorDash to try and make a living, and I can't support my family. That's what gets them out on the street. Now, if the trigger to get them out on the street is somebody saying, gee, if there were fewer immigrants, maybe you'd have some jobs. Hey, that's why people are buying into that. But the underlying problem is money. It's always money.
Finance.
Yeah, and it's like what you need to how I interpret that at least is like the elites of places like Great Britain, like it is fundamentally money is the source of power because but like they're willing to let in these complete aliens over money. Just like, I mean, come on, like they give zero fucks.
I've gotten across a couple of factors that also are involved in the mass immigration, because it's not like the Royal Navy couldn't just blow up those dinghies in the canal. Like they're not a part of the EU, and they can basically decree that no, due to national security reasons, we are going to be making it a demand that any dinghies that come across, or any boat, any vessel whatsoever, be having proper transponders registered and whatever, all that jazz. Which of course all the countries along the Mediterranean could do as well, and then they could just simply give their navies or royal navies, in the case of the UK, some expanded parameters for permitting target practice, just whatever, right? Like it's not really a problem. But then what are the incentives to letting this go through? Because I've seen video clips, for example, where the Royal Navy does actually come and intercept, but they're not intercepting in order to have them turn away. No, they are to escort them into the island, which is kind of pretty retarded, like in fundamentally speaking. Because like if you start blowing up some dinghies, you're just going to have that cease by itself. You're not going to have even need to patrol all that much. They're going to get the picture. Nobody's going to want to be paying human traffickers a bunch of money only to get blown off the ocean, right? And at this point, like, because it's not the same with the Mediterranean, there you can trick a whole bunch of poor people who know nothing. But by the time they have already been to Europe and they have already gotten to France, then it would be notably wiser. So they are not going to be that easy to trick either. So UK could easily do this, but then, okay, what makes the UK actually then escort them and invite these people, which are by law considered illegal aliens, right? And the way that they are transgressing could easily be categorized as an infiltrator, a hostile political operative, whatever one you want, right? No, what they instead do, they take and they shove it into like nice hotels and stuff like that. Now, an interesting thing is that many of these hotels, they were about to go bankrupt, or they were about to go belly up. And then, but somehow they now get like a whole bunch of state subsidies. So clearly one can see like anyone who owns hotels or anything is one way or another tied to this basically like a mafia-like corruption, right? Because what they're really doing is also keeping the police from upholding the law and safeguarding the citizens. And they actually apply peculiar attention to, you know, certain areas with these illegal migrants, which technically speaking, actually don't have any rights. Like, you're not a citizen or anything like that. You did not enter legally. You can be considered, like, again, a hostile political operative, a terrorist, or whatever. You know, no due trial even needed. You can be shot on the spot, right? So, it's a like you have the workforce thing. So that's one facet of it. You have the corruption, just like with the things with the hotels, and then you have also that by rigging the vote and the elections. So this is increasingly known as well. Like, this has been stated by, I think, most of those parties, mostly left-wing parties across Europe, have stated themselves, like, kind of like a fuck you to the other side. Like, oh yeah, well, we're just going to be importing people who are absolutely going to be voting for us, and we're setting it in motion. Like, you want to be pushing back against the mobsters, the ones who have all these economic connections tied? Well, okay, good luck. And we can see that this was not something that Labour, by the way, just to be clear, so people don't think that, this was just a left wing or something. Keep in mind, all these things that have culminated to this point was preceded by, what, a decade or so of Tory rule. Right, so this is clearly like, you know, it crosses parties, and it's sort of like what Gabriel, speaking of the Sun, said about the mafia in the state apparatus. So yeah, sorry for rambling. I'm not sure if any.
Oh yeah, go ahead and ramble, man. That's what we're here for. We can put up with it. But yeah,
just to finish off on the UK though, I think that exactly what Coping just said, and we've all just said, the UK seems to be a little bit ahead of the rest of Europe in terms of their de-evolution, shall we say. You know, people in the UK, they know now that Tories, Labour, none of it matters. And that's why you're seeing a lot of people out, and it's growing every day, and people are getting angrier every day in the UK. So, you know, I think that they realize now that, you know, this whole party system, it's all a bunch of bullshit. And I think we're all coming to that realization in various ways.
Well, yeah, and to the point of the methods of traffic, it's human trafficking, fair and square. It's like there's NGOs, you know, and all sorts of organizations that they have the logistical support, they have the institutional support, they have the legal framework and everything to create these mass importations of people. And it's a problem, you know, worldwide. And that's like completely unrelated to, like, even, you know, left-wing commies are starting to talk about this again, you know, which was, for a while, it was a muted subject in the left. Like, the left was completely silent about this. Now they're starting to come up and say, hey, no, look, this is actually human trafficking at a massive scale. And you have the human traffickers, the people who get paid. They get paid by the people who are going to get trafficked to cross along the board. And then you have these NGOs and the military that come to pick them up, and what they do is pretty simple. Like, they They pay the people, they cram them in, like they charge the people a fee, they cram them into a like whatever vessel they have, and they take them to the high seas, to international waters, and they literally drop them there. You know, they drop them in the water so that the other side is forced to come and rescue them, and then they have all this legal funnel to register them as refugees and so on, and so that they can bypass the immigration policy.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's a trafficking, it's a human trafficking ring at massive scales that makes a shit ton of money of poor, desperate people, you know, or whatever, criminals escaping their country. Well, whoever, you know, wants in on the action, and they take the risk because they'll get benefits, they'll get higher income, whatever. And also, another interesting thing that's part of this business that's very overlooked is how the Western countries, you know, or the first world, is sold to these people. Like, so they paint this beautiful picture, you know, of there's even these Jamaicans, you know, this is, you know, like way back, but
An utopian
there's these
image.
Jamaicans that they had been told that English was a sunny, you know, a sunny and warm place. And they went to Britain and they were like, what the fuck, this is cold. Yeah, this is so cold and so boring. And so, like, they sell this beautiful picture, you know, of like quality of life and, you know, human rights and whatever, and it's all bullshit. And so people, like, they have this expectation of a improvement of their life, and then they just get, you know, the worst paying job, you know, crammed into some tiny room with 100 other people, and you know, the money that they get, it doesn't, you know, cover the expenses of life and shit like that.
Selling off the utopian image of a colonial hangover system.
Oh, yeah.
System.
And so it's a massive institution, and again, it goes to the mobster, you know, the organized criminals, that as a nation becomes more and more degraded, it decays, it corrupts, right? That's what corruption means by definition. And so they start making profit out of things that are fundamentally harmful to their own nation, you know, and they start accumulating, they start adding together, and it's all for the purpose of screwing their own population, because that's what, like, if you're making a profit, that's why I say, like, corruption is something that is fundamentally inefficient. You know, like, if it works, it's not corruption. That's what I'm saying. You know, like, if it makes the nation stronger, if it makes it more wealthy, then it's not corruption. But if it weakens the nation, then it is corruption.
Well, on that note, just when it comes to the distraction factor that is also used to kind of gloss over incompetence and details. So there are some details that necessarily have to come out. For example, when there have been attempts, especially like this is like cases in the Netherlands have been very common, where they're trying to deport, and these are convicted criminals and whatever, and you know, whatnot, illegals otherwise. They try to deport them back to Morocco because that's where they have one of the. And this is kind of before mass immigration. They kind of had started with this. Sort of bilateral relation, as far as I've understood it, where would this happen, where you get a lot of Moroccans that come over and become Dutch, basically. But then you have all these illegals or criminals or whatever, right, to get deported, and then the Moroccan government says, no, we don't want them here. Just like we saw in Colombia and the United States, for example, earlier. But the difference here is that in the case of Colombia and the United States did apply pressure, and voila, the criminals were shipped back. Indeed, the president, if I remember correctly, sent his own plane to actually pick up the gangsters and whatnot. Right? What did the Dutch government do? As far as I've understood it, nothing. Oh no, because of the whatever EHCR, I forgot what it was called, the human rights thing that is tied to the EU, or whatever other kind of excuse, but which may apply more to Morocco than it would, for example, to the rant I had earlier with Britain, because what they really could just say, like, okay, well, fuck you, Morocco. We're just going to cut relations with you, because we can do that as independent countries, even though we are under the EU. We can start having like clauses on travel and whatever and so forth. But they didn't do it because maybe that just goes away certain elements of corruption again. Because if it's efficient, right? If you're having the productive people from Morocco, who is going to give a fuck? That's just fine. But we're importing like the dredges of their society that are just swarming over and causing like very glaring, unabashed, often taunting form of vehement crimes and shit like that. Then like, where is the excuse? No, there's no excuse. You take these misfits back to your own homelands, or we're just going to simply shoot them on the spot as for what they are. When you refuse to take them back, right? Because when Morocco refuses to take them back, they also relinquish the right to protect their citizens. They're not protecting them anymore, and any subsequent complaint that will come thereafter is moot. Then if they have a problem with it, take them back. That's it, and discussion over. So yeah, I just Desi, I see you have your finger up.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that I don't think what is happening is just mere corruption, right? Because another way to view this Mediterranean trafficking is that these are North African cartels, not dealing drugs but dealing in human trafficking. And what is happening is these EU governments are hand in hand doing business with these cartels, because when what you guys said, filling up expensive hotels that were gonna go bankrupt, filling up new vote banks in their own nations, like in the UK, or just spending taxpayer dollars to enable more opportunity to
eating shit. Well, the Boris wave was that they were saying that the economy was going to go to shit because of all the injection of liquidity for the COVID emergency. And what was the response that Boris, a right wing, the Tories in power in Britain, and they stuffed the country up with immigrants, super rapidly out of the 8 million people, and about shit ton of people got in. And that's what they did. They just increased consumption to absorb all that excess liquidity that was injected into the system. That's how they controlled hyperinflation. Sorry, go on.
No, it's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. And if you look at it, the hyperinflation, the mass immigration, it is detrimental to the population. But the people making policy is actually benefiting from this, whether you say corruption, I say criminality, right? Working hand in hand with human traffickers. And these human traffickers, just as Gabriel said, these guys are brutal, right? They will leave people in the middle of the ocean. They do not care about the fucking, the immigrants or whatnot. So this is pure anti-human policy, done hand in hand by both the European, whether left or right. Basically, I call them all centrists because they are centrists, and North African criminal organizations who have popped up primarily because of policies by the EU and America in destabilizing several North African nations, but also due to the poverty and the failures of the Algerian government, the Moroccan government, which is actually a EU ally, by the way, Morocco, and that's a whole separate issues there. But but I can at least appreciate Morocco because it is acting on self-interest, refusing to take back these criminals. This is what Castro did in the 60s and 70s, right?
And Venezuela did the same thing when they started, receiving mass immigration. Venezuela, the first thing it did was kick out
the criminals,
most of its lumpen.
Yeah, absolutely.
The lumpen proletariat. That's one of the first things that is exported, massively. Of course, when you get mass immigration, it's going to be So again, it's like natural for nations to do things that benefit them. You know, getting rid of undesirables. What it's ridiculous is for nations
Someone-
to do things that are against their own interests and receive those undesirables. And that happens
Yeah,
because
and-
someone is making a buck while screwing everyone else, even the
Yeah, and-
undesirables.
And
Gets into
you
why
can
we don't.
you-
I think it's a bad idea to believe Greta Thunberg for even a second, because she comes from the globalist circles, and really globalism is the problem. Like this is not like, it's not an accident that every country does this. It's like you can trace back the plans to start doing this to like the UN, and like when they were founded in after World War II. Like there's certain like on certain issues that the UN tends to have an opinion on, or in a certain direction that they tend to lean on certain issues. And you can learn a lot by looking at all of the things that the UN cares about and what agenda it seems that they seem to prefer. And like the idea of accepting refugees and the ability to claim asylum and so-called global mobility, this is high on their agenda. And like when you see countries doing this, it's all because they're basically implementing UN policies. So this is the rise of basically the new capitalist socialist combination, international is what's going on. And that's the fundamental root of the problem.
Oh yeah, I agree, Nate. It is a fundamental root of the problem, but it predates globalism. Remember when the Roman Republic, right before it fell, not when the Roman Empire fell, but before the Roman Republic fell, you got these guys, the Gracchus brothers. Remember that they tried to give land rights to the Americans, to the Roman citizens, and stop the import of slaves, and they both got killed for that. And that was the problem. Like the oligarchs, the patrician class, they had gained too much wealth with the expansion of the empire, of the republic, but it was expanding, as an imperial hegemon. After winning over Carthage, it had expanded over the peninsula. And so the oligarchs, the patricians, they got a lot of wealth, and they started importing shit tons of slaves, and they started monopolizing the farmland. And sort of the fundamental virtue of the Roman Republic that made its its glory and its power, and its efficiency in war. They had an excellent army because it was a citizen army, that they were all motivated, fighting for their land that they own, for their families and their nation. And so this citizenship, this strong citizenship that was farmer, they had land, this land-owning citizenship, they started to be dispossessed by oligarchs buying more and more property, creating massive latifundii, and filling it with slaves. And as they did that, then the people started, the Roman citizenship started to lose out on the race. They couldn't compete with the slave work. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. It's importing slaves through human trafficking, and making money off of them while discarding your own population. So it predates globalism. Globalism is that same phenomena, but happening at a global scale.
Precisely. And another thing about the UN, it's undoubted that UN does push all of these, pro-immigration, agendas and policies. But at the same time, I just see this as the UN as a legitimizing tool for, Western nations to implement the pro-immigration policies. Because remember, the UN also prescribes other things like don't commit genocide, don't commit proxy war, respect people's sovereignty that Western nations do not respect. They completely violate. So it's like the things that they want to do, they use the UN to legitimize, and the things that they disagree with the UN, they completely disregard the UN. So UN is while a symptom, a tool of implementation
The empire.
of the empire, or global homo, as one says.
The gay, the global American empire.
Yes, but it is still. I don't think it's the root of the problem. It's just a symptom of the problem, but definitely a very important symptom. Agreed. Yeah. Who's going next? Should we change topics now? Vaughn already told us in the comments this is going into a black hole. So. Have you guys talked about the non-existent warships from Turkey and Egypt that was so hyped up, that was supposed to protect Greta Thunberg, that just didn't arrive?